Welcome to the Prairie State Wire podcast. I'm Brian Hyde. Today I'm joined by Florian Sohnke. And Florian, I'm going to come right out and say that sounds like a great writer's name. And yet I'm just becoming acquainted with you and the Chicago Contrarian. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background, and then let's talk about some of the issues that you take on a regular basis.
Brian, first, thanks for hosting me. I'm a freelance writer and editor. I've done some speech writing, and right now I'm completing editing on a book. But I created Chicago Contrarian 5 years ago because I thought Chicago was missing a conservative voice, and the purpose of which was to inform Chicago. And as you well know, Chicago is a deep, deep, deep blue city. It does have some conservative voices on the radio. You have Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the Morning Answer. You had John Cass, who has written a conservative column for many years with the Tribune, and now he's independent. And you have a group like Illinois Policy, which covers the statewide issues. And I thought after a cursory examination of the political landscape in Chicago, my view was we needed a media source, not breaking news, but a media source to inform Chicago's conservatives of conservative ideals and to consistently offer conservative solutions to Chicago's problems. So I came up with Contrarian, and we've grown a little bit. We've got some truly gifted writers, some very talented people. We're reaching a pretty broad audience now. We have over 20,000 monthly readers. So we're very happy with our progress. And now I'm here with you. So as a result of it.
One of the first things I have to ask you about, what is the reaction of members of the legacy media? How are they reacting to the Chicago Contrarian?
I think they have grown accustomed to us, but only through gritted teeth. I think they're very frustrated with us. We criticize Chicago media figures very often. Most of the criticism is directed at the print media. A number of the reporters there, and I would say an overwhelming majority of them are very progressive, and the decline in Chicago print media particularly is a direct result of the editorial or editors of the two major newspapers, the Tribune and the Sun-Times, allowing their reporters to allow their bias to seep into reporting. And I think they took advantage of their readership. Subscribers started to see an increase and a more obvious bias. They retreated. And I think this is why that both newspapers sometimes went nonprofit and formed a relationship with WBEZ, which is so far to the left. It's laughable. And now they're complaining about millions of dollars in cuts. And the Tribune, I think, has struggled too. And in fact, just recently, the Sun-Times reported a round of layoffs. So print media in Chicago, and of course now digital, their reputation is lying in ashes. And I think the general public in Chicago has warmly greeted us. They're appreciative of our perspective. It confirms many of their beliefs, and it's just another one of the very small number of media sources in Chicago offering a conservative voice. There is a conservative constituency in Chicago. It just needed to be tapped into.
Let's talk a little bit about what some of the bigger challenges are, not just for conservatives, but for people within the Chicago area. I mean, there are political there are political problems that are brought up, to keep people occupied. But as far as what is on the ground, the grassroots, where are people most concerned?
I think there are three issues which dominate the voters in Chicago, and I would say the first. I think all three of them. There's a balance there. There's not one which is more important than the other. I think there's like I said, a balance. I think that the primary concern is public finances. Chicago has got three very deep public finance problems. They've got deep debt. In the coming year, the city of Chicago is facing around a $1.1 billion deficit. This is their annual budget. And for the past decade or so, even though the Chicago City Council had been a reliable rubber stamp for the mayor, Lori Lightfoot ran into some problems. Brandon Johnson had some serious problems getting his last budget passed. The second biggest problem is Chicago's hopelessly failing schools. And as you well know, there are probably 60 schools in the city of Chicago in which the math and reading proficiency rates are at 0%. That is just a public embarrassment. And most of this is due to the Chicago Teachers Union. The Core Caucus, which leads it, is largely responsible for shifting their focus from enforcing their contract, looking out for the best interests of its members, and educating students to an entirely political agenda. And it costs students dearly. We've lost hundreds of thousands of residents, and the schools have continued to decline in quality. The third problem is public transit. We've got about a $700 million deficit in the CTA. Fewer riders are using the CTA. It's crime-ridden. So you have those three major problems. And I'd like to add, if I could, the the Chicago Teachers Union contract, which was recently negotiated. This comes at a cost of $1.5 billion over the next year. So we've got a little bit over $1 billion city budget. We've got $1.5 billion we need to come up to pay the new teachers contract. And we've got about a $650 to $700 million deficit in the CTA. We are way underwater. We have terrible fiscal dislocation. Those are the three biggest problems. And instead of fighting, and I think many residents have thrown up their hands and they've said, I'm out of here. And that has led to an exodus of over 500,000 people in the past 30 years from Chicago to the collar suburbs or out of state.
Goodness. So I'm curious then, what is the role of the Chicago Contrarian in helping to either solidify or perhaps encourage that conservative constituency out there that probably feels kind of outnumbered, to put it mildly?
Probably, but those numbers did grow. I believe it was 193,000 Chicago residents voted for Trump in the 2024 election. And this was welcome news to colleagues, political colleagues. I know people over the Chicago GOP and just conservatives with whom I've become acquainted since launching this enterprise. I would say, again, our purpose was to inform, to give a conservative perspective. It's very difficult for me to measure our impact other than to say we have roughly 20,000 monthly readers. We have over 50,000 people on Twitter. I think we've been warmly embraced. Again, as what we have done is to give written work. Publishing our written work confirms their political beliefs. I don't want to go so far as to say we're giving hope to people, but I think we've been welcomed and we're appreciated for giving the public a perspective which has been so long missing for so long in Chicago. And it goes all the way back, Brian, to the early 1960s. The biggest reason our big cities, or at least Chicago, fell into the clutches of the progressive left is because the National Republican Party washed their hands of the inner cities in the 60s. They left it to the Democrats. And unlike some of the other cities, New York has a conservative party. They've got a Republican Party. Los Angeles has had a Republican Party. They had Richard Riordan in the 1990s. New York City had Rudy Giuliani and briefly Michael Bloomberg. Chicago has been without a Republican mayor in over 100 years, and there have been no Republicans in the city council in decades. So we have been part of a conservative media movement which has emerged in the past 15 to 20 years. I would say John Cass has been the most consistent, and Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the Morning Answer. Illinois Policy has covered statewide issues from a libertarian perspective, and we are unapologetically conservative.
So let's talk about managing expectations. I know a lot of people, particularly with the election of Trump, are feeling optimistic. Like, well, we've shifted in a direction that wasn't, the direction that the Biden administration and basically the progressive left was taking us. But talk to me about the need to not lean towards all at once kinds of solutions. Why do we have to temper our expectations?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I would say, as one cog in this growing conservative machine, and I probably would say we are most aligned with the Morning Answer crew. Illinois Policy tends to be, again, they call themselves libertarian. John Cass is conservative. I think our work, again, as I said, it confirms their political beliefs, which has long been absent. But I think the one way I measure the impact of our work along with our, partners is in the past 3 years alone, after a string, and this is decades of Democratic victories, and watching Chicago slip further into the grip of the progressive jaw. Chicago has experienced some victories at the ballot box, which gives a lot of our voters room for optimism. I think Chicago reached ebb with the election of Lori Lightfoot, the riots in 2020. We had Kim Foxx, who was a simply dreadful prosecutor who simply shrugged at most crime. Brandon Johnson's election took us even lower. However, since his election, he has been thwarted by the city council. He has lost in several ballot initiatives and attempts to raise revenue in the city council. Kim Foxx left office, and she was replaced by a career attorney and prosecutor, a moderate Democrat. And in the past 6 months, 6 of the 10 Board of Election candidates were seated by candidates who had no affiliation with the Chicago Teachers Union. So I believe this is cause for optimism. I think Chicago could be on the rebound. And at the risk of seeming somewhat conceited, I will take a little bit of credit for helping inform the public about an alternative to democratic or progressive rule.
No, more power to you for what you're doing. Let's direct our listeners. Where can they find the Chicago Contrarian? Is it strictly an online presence? Is this something they can actually hold in their hands?
No, it's digital only, chicagocontrarian.com. And then we've got an accompanying Twitter account, Chicago Contrarian. And but we're digital only. And we've got probably about 12 contributors. 6 or 7 of them are our regular people, and we get some people. We're all professionals. We have careers elsewhere. We have business owners, attorneys. We've got a broad group of contributors.
Well, it sounds like a great way to bring like-minded people together, and I hope that you're reaching likewise the people out there that are looking for some good, thought-provoking content. Again, we're talking with Florian Sohnke. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave with our audience before we wrap things up?
Come and view our work if you're a resident of the city of Chicago. There is a conservative constituency here. We're happy to feed it, and we're happy to be a part of what we believe is going to be putting Chicago back on the road to recovery. So that would be my message.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Again, we've been talking with Florian Sohnke, who's the founder of the Chicago Contrarian. This is the Prairie State Wire podcast.